Hey, Hal, Randy Roth here. Underneath the mango tree here in Paraguay, South America. Beautiful day today. It's scheduled to be like 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Yesterday was probably the hottest day of the year, and saying 106. But it's the hottest month of the year. I think that it usually stays in the 90s here for the summertime. And we will even get a freeze in the wintertime. So it's the temperatures aren't much different than what I experienced in Oregon. But today we're going to talk about uh, the Book of Revelation. And somebody was telling me, the Book of Revelation is entirely symbolic, and it's like, no, it's not. If people think that it's symbolic, it's because they're not willing to actually figure it out. The Word of God says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to find it out. Let's give an example of the what was given in the time of Jesus and how it is now a modern day understanding. See, Jesus said, and it looks entirely symbolic, but it's not. It's found in Matthew 24, Luke 21. It says, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. That's what he says in Luke 21. The sun will be darkened, and the moon not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven. And then the parallel passage there in Revelation 6 tells us that the sky will roll up as a scroll and people will hide in caves, commanding the stones to fall on them. What's being talked about here is a lot of people speculate and all. Oh, it could be like an asteroid, and it's all symbolic. No, let's look at it a little closer. Jesus said the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Powers, where we get, it's dunamis in the Greek, where we get dynamite. And the heavens is Oranos. Oranos was a Greek god of the heavens. That was just like Jupiter and all the other planets. So when there was a discovery made of the seventh planet in the 1850s, the planet Uranus was named after this same Greek god. And then 10 years later, there was another discovery in 1860s, and that was uranium, which was named after the same Greek gods. So what we have going on here is we have Jesus declaring that the powers of uranium will be shaken. Now, in Jesus' day, nobody understood what uranium was. Nobody understood radioactivity. And if they did, it was very obscure, and that was not something that was understood. So when Jesus spoke in terms, it was terms that would translate into the end times events. So what happens? The sun is darkened, the moon not give its light. What happens after a nuclear war? It's called a nuclear winter. All of the dust in the air and everything causes the sun to go dark and the moon not give its light. And the name for that is called a nuclear winter. It says the stars will fall from heaven. What are stars powered by? They're powered by nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, the same as nukes. And so when the stars fall from heaven, if one star, stars are way bigger than the Earth. And so, that's the basic understanding today. Of course, people will argue that, but let them. So the understanding is that the star is empowered by nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, in which is where we get the nuclear bombs. So when the nuclear bombs fall from heaven, the star, that's what it's being talked about here, the sky rolls up like a scroll. What's the nuclear mushroom cloud? Well, it's the sky rolling up like a scroll. And then it talks about people hiding in caves and commanding the rocks to fall. It's called nuclear fallout. So it's very It's a very simple concept to understand. And a lot of other passages that talk about this confirm that. Like, I believe it's Zechariah, or yeah, Zechariah 12:14 talks about um, the faces melt like wax at this time when the sun and moon are darkened. Well, that's what was seen in Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombs were dropped there. People's faces, where they were left standing with their faces melted away. We also see, um, there was another point there I wanted to make. Oh, yeah. So, Babylon this is how Babylon is destroyed. Mystery Babylon, the great whore. And afterwards, the smoke from her rises, and the people stand from afar off. Well, you stand from afar off if you don't want to get part of the radiation. And the smoke of her goes up forever and ever, and nobody can live there. Well, because of the radiation. Only the jackals. It doesn't mean life doesn't exist there. It's just the life that doesn't understand that you're being mutated because of the radiation. All right. So that is one example of the it's not symbology. It's like people say, oh, well, it symbolizes this, it means this, and it's like this number means that. No, Jesus directly told us and used the word oranos, which is where we get the word uranium. So it's something that's not so far out there that you can't get a hold of. You can get an understanding of the book of Revelation because the actual symbols they're not symbols of what they're actual things that exist. So, for example, let's give another one. The second trumpet talks about the mountain of fire falling into the ocean. Well, today, if you study out the mountain that is a volcano that's built, it's an active volcano that is called Mount Palma. And I believe it's one of the Dutch islands out in the Atlantic Ocean off of Europe. And it's built entirely from lava, but not the lava that is like uh, in Hawaii, where you have lava flows and it creates nice, clean uh, um, rock. No, Mount Palma throws it up in the air, and there's a cooling and lumps that come down all over the place, and it becomes more like a gravel. It's unstable. It's not a big blob. It's it's a bunch of loose like gravel. And the scientists since 1970 are saying this mountain, it's just a matter of time before it splits, cracks, and falls into the sea and creates a big tsunami across the Pacific Ocean. And we saw this type of tsunami happen in Alaska. I don't remember the name of the bay, but there's some people out fishing in it, and they ended up riding the wave outside of the bay onto the land and ended up in a tree. A father and his son actually survived that. But the tsunami they're predicting going across the Atlantic Ocean would hit the Pacific coast, not the Pacific coast, but the eastern board of the Americas with they're predicting a 2 mile high uh, wave. Well, that's substantial. That would take out, the all the border and most of the population of the United States lives in the 70 miles within the oceans. So, anyways, that's substantial. So when we look at the book of Revelation, we don't need to look at it as a pipe dream. What we need to look at it is we need to look at it in the form of God actually wants to reveal it to his people. And if we just, nonchalantly think, oh, it's just no big deal, then, it's we're not going to come up with an understanding. And it's really important that we do come up with an understanding. One of the things that the Lord revealed to me was concerning the beast of Revelation. We have the first beast and we have the second beast. And most people, they all only focus on the second beast of Revelation because naturally it's the dangerous one that has the mark, right? I mean, if you take the mark, you do not go to heaven. And a fiery expectation, as in Revelation 14:10, you end up in a place of the lake of fire that's forever burning with fire and brimstone. Let's say, so it's important to understand what this is. And it says that let the wise understand. To understand, we need to understand that there's a first beast that precedes the second beast. The first beast, we were told, lasts 3.5 years, and it creates the authority for the second beast. The second beast says that it uses all the authority given to it from the first beast. But the first beast, goes away. So what we had for that lasted 3.5 years, and it was worldwide, and it created a bunch of authority and everybody understands it. Even the atheists understand that when the pandemic came around, what it did is it created the authority for a one world currency. Even, it's like when we were in it, if you mention something of that nature, it's like, oh yeah, that's what this is all about. It's all about control. And so when it was declared over on June 5th, 2023, by the World Health Organization, they also announced along with it their intention to implement what they called was the Global Digital Health Certificate. And, we haven't heard anything about that in as far as that particular name, really. But we have heard of several countries that have required their population to get a digital ID. And now, since that time, we've heard a lot about digital ID. We've heard a lot about the opposition. If people understand, hey, look, this is a total control type of implementation. We're really not interested in it. And so there's a lot of opposition. However, when you merge that with another pandemic, a second beast of Revelation, what you end up with is that you end up with people willingly getting on board, saying, "Yeah, no. If people don't want to get on board with us, this is a health issue. They need to get beheaded. If it's serious enough, yes, people will get on board with that because that's where it becomes life and death. The first pandemic didn't amount to much. And John Paul Jackson prophesied before he died in 2015. He prophesied there will be 2 pandemics that are coming. The first one will not amount to much, he says, but the second one will be substantial. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a second one that is getting ready to come in, and the Lord's telling me it's time to get ready. It's time to get ready for the next pandemic. And what will follow with this pandemic is the mark of the beast, just like the jab followed with the first pandemic. So, I don't know if it was, what did we have, 6 to 8 months from the initial? And that's what I'm predicting that we're going to have. We're going to have the mark is going to be implemented just like the jab was implemented for the first beast. All right. So people say, well, how do you come up with that? I mean, that's not until Revelation 13. The the book of Revelation has, all the seals first, all the trumpets, and then it mentions the 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 beast of Revelation, and then the bowls. Well, let's take a look at that. See, John, as he's finishing up the trumpets in chapter 10, the angel comes to him with one foot in the ocean and one foot on dry land and tells him to eat this book. And the whole reason for eating this book is for the purpose of prophesying again. So, what we got going on is we've got a second prophecy being addressed in the book of Revelation, and we see that starting in chapter 12. Chapter 12 starts at the beginning with the Star of Bethlehem, the sign in the heaven. What did John write at the beginning? To write down the things that are, which were, what are, and what shall be. So he's talking about things that, I mean, the prophecy is a vast period of time. Things that were, which are, and shall be. I believe that's in Revelation 1:19 that he makes that announcement. Anyways, I'm paraphrasing, not quoting exactly. So it's there. So what we got going on is we have the beginning of the second prophecy. And the chapter 12 of Revelation is about the early church. And we know that because it ends with it talking about the woman being scattered to the wilderness and the dragon having to wait to make war with the rest of her offspring, the generations that follow. So what we got going on is we got generations that are following for this woman, and not, it's not, confined into a short period of time, such as 3.5 years or 7 years, or what people love to do. So chapter 12 is talking about the early church, and then talks about how they're scattered to the nations, and then we have chapter 13, which brings us up to modern day. Chapter 13 then talks about the first beast, which we experienced with the pandemic. The first worldwide, nobody could get away from the whole mask and 6-foot distancing, except unless you're an indigenous people in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so what we got going on is we have the second beast getting ready and waiting in the wings. And and the second beast has to occur before the bowls can be poured out. We have before the bowls are poured out, because the first bowl is about those who take the mark. So the mark has to happen before the first bowl. Just like the first trumpet, the 144,000 have to be sealed before the wrath of God, as people like to say. The word is thumos, is poured out rather than orge. So people confuse the two and say, oh, we're not appointed to wrath. Well, we're not appointed to hell, orge. Thumos, on the other hand, is God's anger, and we are subject to God's anger, as David wrote in Psalms 30, verse 5. God's anger lasts for a night, but joy comes in the morning. He understood this after he sinned with Bathsheba, and he took a census, and 70,000 people died as a result. So what we got going on is we have man declaring in the sixth seal that God's wrath has come. Was it God's wrath? No, not any more than the fifth seal. The fifth seal is people getting martyred. Is people getting martyred for Christ's sake? Is that God's wrath? Absolutely not. God doesn't pour his wrath on his people. Not at all. So when people say, oh, well, that's God's wrath, it's like, no. You get to the sixth seal, where mankind is nuked by mankind, and then Scripture declares that man makes this declaration that God's wrath has come. This is the same exact declaration that is made in Job 1, that the fire of God came from heaven and consumed all the livestock and all the herdsmen, and I alone escaped. Was it the wrath of God? Was it the fire of God? No. But it's man making the declaration. That's the exact same thing that's happening here in Revelation 6. Man is making the declaration. And then right after that, we see that the 144,000 have to be sealed before God can harm the earth and the sea. So God didn't harm the earth and the sea. That was man harming the earth and the sea with the sixth seal, nuking it. Okay? So the trumpets are indeed what God's doing. And the word there is not orge, it's thumos in the Greek, which is God's anger. See, when God pours out his anger, it's temporal. When God pours out his wrath, it's forever burning with fire and brimstone. So there's a big difference when somebody says, well, we're not appointed to wrath. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:9. Verse 10 says, what we are appointed to, and that's forever forever being with him, forever, for eternal salvation and forever being with him. So what we got going on is we have an appointment that's eternal, and what we're not eternal is also, what we're not appointed to is also eternal. So we've got two things going on here. We have God's anger, which is thumos, and God's wrath. So I asked a friend of mine in Greece who speaks Greek as his first language. I asked him, what's the difference between thumos and orge? And he says, well, thumos does not carry the weight of orge. I said, well, just like anger does not carry the weight of wrath? And he says, exactly. Orge and thumos are two separate terms, just like anger and wrath. We are subject to God's anger, but we are not appointed to his wrath. Okay? So when people, stand on the idea that we're not appointed to wrath and therefore there has to be a rapture, well, they're standing on a concept that isn't based on a translation error. And so I think I've pretty much covered the fact that the chapter 13 is present day in Revelation. And so after chapter 13, it ends with the mark of the beast, and then after that we see what happens to those who take the mark of the beast. And so when somebody wants to tell you, hey, look, this tribulation period lasts for 7 years, Scripture does not present that. Revelation shows that it's very possibly a much longer period of time. If you look at the seven trumpets, the first four trumpets do not give time frames. But then it ends with those first four trumpets with the last verse of chapter 8 and tells us that the three woes are coming, and the three woes coincide with the last three trumpets. And the three woes all give, well, the last woe doesn't give a time frame because that's when Jesus comes. It comes. And then, but the fifth and the sixth trumpet, the fifth trumpet lasts 5 months. And the sixth trumpet has two time frames given in there. One for the time of the Gentiles, which is, 42 months, I think. And then the other one is the two witnesses, which is 1,260 days. And then there's a period of time in which they're dead, and then they come back to life. And so this all has to occur within the second woe, the sixth trumpet. And it is, the thing about the woes is that verse 12 of chapter 9 tells us that the first trumpet is complete before the second. The first woe is complete before the second woe can begin. And And then Revelation 11:14 tells us the same of the second and the third woe. So the second woe has to be completed, and we're not told whether or not the two time frames given for the time of the Gentiles and the two witnesses, if they overlap, if there's a time in between them, which then would be longer than 7 years, or if they're sequential, which would make them 7 years long, for just one trumpet, one woe. And so, for argument's sake, let's say that it's 3.5 years. Well, that, and then we have 5 months for the previous one. And then, people that present this, then they'll tell you, oh, well, then there's a time and a half time that's in the next chapter, and the first beast lasts 3.5 years. So, yes, I am saying that it's a repeat prophecy starting in chapter 12, but we're not given any time frame for the 7 seals and the first 4 trumpets. 90% of the events don't have any time frame given to them. And so, the first 4 trumpet and 4 seals, I believe, occurred a long time ago, at least started a long time ago, as presented by the Jack Chick publication of the 4 Horsemen. I concur with his first 3. On the 4th one, no, I do not concur. The 4th horseman is not a pale horse. It is a green horse. The word is chloros. And so what we have is 4 world conquests, 4 horsemen, 4 armies, 4 wars, 4 world conquests. The first is the Catholicism, and what is it? The Bolsheviks, which I need to study more on. Then we have communism, the red horse, which, these fit. You get the black horse, Nazism. What we got going on with the Nazis, we had hyperinflation during that period of time. There was cartoons of people with a wheelbarrow full of money chasing after the banker running away because the money had no value. It said, do not touch the oil and the wine. What was in abundance? Well, the oil and wine that was confiscated from the Jews. And so, yeah. And then, so the 4th horseman, what we got going on is the green horse, environmentalism. Kill the baby, save the whale. And, that, I think that era of time kind of came to a close when the U.S., when there was a reversal of Roe versus Wade. Of course, that didn't change anything. And we've already had like a quarter of the world's population taken out with abortion. And, it could also include the next pandemic. And it could also include, it would include the first pandemic as well, all the abortion. It's all in the name of even environmentalism. The whole Bill Gates, we need to reduce the population of the earth by 9/10. And so, the scripture says they get a quarter of the world's population. And then then that comes to a close. And before, well, you got the 5th and the 6th seal, and then we have the trumpets poured out. A lot of people say, oh, well, no, the 7th trumpet is not or the 7th seal is when Jesus comes, and all that. But if you look at it, the angel that had the 7th seal is not allowed to harm the earth and the sea, which is what's going on in the 7 trumpets, without first sealing up the 144,000. So if you look at that and read it carefully, you see that the 7th seal is the opening of the manifestation of the 7 trumpets. Okay? So, are the 144,000 sealed yet? No. Is the mark of the beast implemented yet? No. But it's soon to be here, and you need to start preparing. Okay? I think I pretty much made the video long enough, and so I hope this is something that has helped you out. Let me know in the comments. Thank you. Take care. God bless.